My name is Maeve Ellison, 55 years old. Augusta's courthouse smelled like lemon polish and old paper, the perfume of rooms where decisions outlast their makers. The wood was dark and nicked, the brass rails dull with the touch of too many worried hands. I sat at council table with my palms wrapped around a manila envelope, the flap dented from my thumb, pressing the same place all morning, the same way you worry a scab you know you shouldn't. Behind me, 4 chairs creaked as the children, my children in everything but name, shifted and tried to make themselves small. Across the aisle, my sister sat in a steel blue blazer like armor, chin high, eyes flat. Janet had always been good at pretending the camera was on her, even when there wasn't one. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise!" Judge Charles Lane stepped up to the bench with the unhurried gravity of a man who'd heard every version of the truth and knew they all bled. We stood, we sat. A quiver of whispers slid along the benches, neighbors who knew us by our mailbox flag, nurses from my night shift, the cashier from the corner store who always slipped Noah a sticker when I looked away. Everyone wanted to see how family looked when it broke in public. Porter versus Ellison, the clerk read, and the formal names felt like masks over faces I'd kissed and scolded and fed. Stephen Hart rose for Janet, a crisp man with a crisp tie and a stack of papers he handled like cards he always expected to win with. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth enough to pour, "my client seeks the immediate restoration of custody of her 4 children, who have been unlawfully retained by the respondent for the past 10 years. Mrs. Ellison has obstructed contact, alienated the minors, and is using estate property to exert leverage." Unlawfully retained. Alienated. Words with teeth. I felt Ryan flinch behind me more than I saw it. He's taller than me now, built like a boy surprised to find himself a man. Claire twisted a ribbon round and round her index finger until the pad whitened. Esther sat forward, ready to spring at the slightest provocation. Noah leaned so close his shoulder hummed against the back of my chair, a quiet vibration I've learned to hear even when he doesn't speak. Ms. Thompson, my Evelyn, steady as bedrock, stood in a gray suit that fit like a thought she'd already finished having. "Your Honor, the evidence will show a decade of abandonment, not an hour of babysitting. My client enrolled the children in school, provided medical care, kept records, and kept the lights on. We will present contemporaneous notes, messages, and corroborating testimony." Judge Lane looked at me, not unkindly. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, "you're holding something there. Do the children know what's inside?" Every sound in the room fell through the floor. Inside the envelope, the crumpled note Janet left in a diaper bag that first day, words inked crooked from haste. "I'll be back soon. Thanks, Maeve." The printouts of texts where soon became "send money" and "don't ask questions." A stack of school registrations signed by my hand when the office secretary raised one eyebrow and then stamped the forms anyway. And one more thing I hadn't expected to find, sealed in a thinner, softer envelope. My mother's handwriting. The ink, the color of lake water, slanted and certain. On the outside, in my father's block print, a title plain enough to ring, "Care Clause." If I opened that letter here, it would say something our mother had not been brave enough to tell us while she was alive, something about houses belonging where care actually lives. If I opened that letter here, the children would hear their grandmother speak from farther away than any witness bench about who keeps what when love is work instead of promise. If I opened that letter here, I would be choosing to make true, in public, a line our family had drawn in private ink. "No," I said, and my voice did not shake. "They don't know all of it. Not yet." Hart smiled a little at that, like a man who'd watched enough opponents put their blade down rather than risk nicking their own. "Your Honor, if the respondent insists on surprise filings related to the estate, it pertains to care," Ms. Thompson said, not raising her voice, but setting it in the room like a level you can lay a foundation on, and to stability. The judge held up a palm. "We will proceed carefully," he said. "Mrs. Porter, you will speak. Mrs. Ellison, you will present what you have. I will not permit spectacle." His gaze skimmed the gallery, whispers folded like paper fans. Janet stood by habit more than need. She had learned how to control a narrative before either of us knew there were words for that kind of thing. "I left them temporarily," she said, sweetening the syllables like she always did when something bitter was coming. I was overwhelmed. 4 children, no support. I trusted my sister for a short time. She changed numbers. She moved without telling me. She cut me out. I want my children back. I thought of rain, hard and slanted, the doorbell pounding like a cry for help, the diaper bag lighter than a life and heavier than a promise. I thought of Ryan at 8, asking where his mother was, with a mouth ringed in peanut butter, because that's what I had in the cupboard. Claire's stuffed bunny damp, one eye bailing on the job, Esther's shoes untied, and the wild logic of 4-year-olds who believe tantrums call lost people home. Noah's diaper so long unchanged that his skin had reddened, and the way his small hand had found my collar without looking. I thought of calling and calling until the voicemail filled like a sink and overflowed. The judge turned my way. "Mrs. Ellison, how did the children come to live with you?" "She brought them and left," I said. She said an hour. It's been 10 years. It sounded simple when I built it from only the bones. I didn't say the rest. I put them on my insurance. I learned whose cough means albuterol now and whose means wait and see. I lived by school calendars tacked to a corkboard and a paycheck that got thin the way an old dish towel does. I memorized which teacher would call immediately and which would email late and wordy. I learned the weight of a choir ribbon and a science fair trifold and a dance shoe and a soccer ball and a fear that wakes a child at 3 a.m. and calls your name with a question mark at the end of it. Heart slid forward, silk on rails. "Your Honor, we have no formal guardianship paperwork, no consent from my client, no court order. What we have is a sister who decided unilaterally to keep 4 children and a house." Ms. Thompson lifted one document protector and, with a soft click, freed a page. She held it up so the handwriting glinted under the lights. Janet's, messy and unmistakable. "Then let's start with this," she said. "Left in a diaper bag. Dated the day she drove away. I'll be back soon. Thanks, Mildred." The bailiff carried it to the bench. The judge read it. He didn't blink or sigh, but something in the set of his jaw changed, like a hinge settling. "We'll enter it," he said. "Continue." Text messages came next, the ones I'd transferred off an old phone whose screen was spiderwebbed, but still willing to give up its ghosts. "Send me $500. Don't ask questions. I need cash, not calls. Dates lined up with birthdays, with late notices, with the month the refrigerator died, and we ate shelf-stable food for 2 weeks while I saved to replace it." Janet stared at the ceiling. Hart objected to context. The judge overruled. "Mrs. Ellison," Judge Lane said, pen poised, "did you attempt to facilitate contact between the children and their mother?" "Yes," I said. "I called until the voicemail filled. I mailed letters to the last address I had. They came back. I asked every mutual friend if they had a number that worked. I painted an honest picture and left out just enough to keep the children's hearts from breaking on my watch. I didn't look back at them when I said it. The truth can be cruel even when it's the whole point." The judge wrote. His pen made a sound like small rain. Then he looked past me. "I will be hearing from the minors later," he said, "but not before lunch, for now." His gaze dropped to my envelope. Even from the bench, he could see the second, smaller envelope inside. The one with my mother's cursive caught in my father's block letters. Care clause. He tilted his head. "Is there anything else, Mrs. Ellison, that you anticipate we will need to make a complete record?" The room held its breath on my answer. My thumb found the dent it had made and pressed again. In my head, my mother's voice came as if from the far end of a hallway. "This house belongs where care is given, not where excuses are made." I imagined reading those words out loud and watching them cut cleanly, the way a good knife does, through the sinew that connected us all in ways that had already frayed. "There is," I said, "a letter regarding care and the Elm Street house, written by our mother. I'll present it if the court requires it." Janet's head snapped toward me, the first truly honest movement she'd made all morning. Her mouth opened, shut. For a heartbeat, she looked young. The girl who once slept on my floor the night we found out Dad's biopsy came back bad, who reached for my hand in the dark and didn't let go. Then the old polish slid back over her like a coat. Judge Lane nodded once. "Noted." He adjusted his glasses and set his pen down as if to remove sharp objects from the table. "We'll recess for 15 minutes, Vinois," he said. "When we return, we'll take Mrs. Porter's testimony in full." The gavel tapped. The bench murmured. Chairs scraped, and the lemon smell rose again as bodies heat shifted the air. I didn't stand. I kept one hand on the envelope like a patient on a pulse, counting beats. Noah leaned close enough that I could feel his breath save me from drowning. "Are we okay?" he whispered, the way you ask about weather you can't see. "We're together," I said. It was the most honest thing I had. When I finally turned, Ryan's eyes were glassy but dry. Claire's ribbon had cut a shallow groove in her finger. Esther's jaw jutted, defiant. Past them in the aisle, a familiar face slipped in late and took a seat near the back. Square shoulders, a careful stillness. Eric Larson, my sister's ex-husband. He caught my eye, lifted his hand in a small, steadying hello, and rested it on a slim, black USB drive on his knee. A new weight settled in my chest. Not dread this time, something heavier and more useful. The past had arrived, and it had brought receipts. When the gavel struck again and Judge Lane returned, the room stilled. Even the coughs from the gallery seemed to hold themselves in. Janet adjusted her blazer, lifted her chin, and slid into her role as if she were auditioning on a stage instead of testifying in a courtroom. Her lawyer heart gave her a slight nod, and she began. "I left my children," she said, her voice pitched soft, "because I was overwhelmed. 4 kids, no support, no money. I always planned to return once I had stability, but Maeve shut me out, changed her number, moved schools, kept them hidden. She poisoned them against me." A well-timed tremor hit her lip, a single tear sliding down as if rehearsed. Behind me, Ryan muttered under his breath, "She's lying." His voice was low, but the judge caught it. Lane glanced at him, then at me, and I pressed a reassuring hand on Ryan's knee under the table. Hart stepped in, guiding Janet through her testimony. Jobs that didn't last. Apartments she claimed I never knew about. Letters she said I never answered. Each answer slick with plausibility. Each phrase sharpened to cut me down. If you didn't know her, you might believe she'd been the victim of a decade of exclusion rather than the architect of her own absence. Then it was Evelyn Thompson's turn. She rose with a calm that steadied my pulse. "Mrs. Porter," she said evenly, "do you recognize this note?" She held up the crumpled scrap I had kept for 10 years. The handwriting was undeniable. Janet blinked, feigned confusion. "It looks like mine." "It is yours," Evelyn pressed, voice firm now. "Left in a diaper bag. Dated the day you drove away. Read the words, please." Janet's lips tightened. "I'll be back soon. Thanks, Mildred." The courtroom stirred, whispers, shifting feet, the creak of benches. "Soon," Evelyn repeated. "Would you agree 10 years is longer than soon?" Hart objected. The judge overruled. Janet's silence was answer enough. Next came the text messages projected on the screen. "Send me $500. Don't ask questions. Need cash, not calls." Dates, timestamps, her name on every bubble. The room buzzed again. I felt Claire lean forward, whispering, "She never even asked about us." Esther crossed her arms, scowling openly. Noah, too young when those texts were sent, buried his face in my sleeve. "Mrs. Porter," Evelyn said, "can you point to one message where you asked about your children's well-being?" Janet's hands fluttered like trapped birds before settling in her lap. "I was ashamed," she murmured. I couldn't face them. The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. His gaze slid toward me, then toward the unopened, smaller envelope still inside mine, the one with my mother's handwriting. But before he could speak, the back doors creaked. Eric Larson, Janet's ex-husband, rose from his seat. He carried the USB drive, his face pale but determined. "Your Honor," he said, voice rough but steady, "I have something the court should see." Hart bristled. "Objection! This witness hasn't been disclosed." "Overruled," Judge Lane said swiftly. "Mr. Larson, approach." Eric walked forward, handed the drive to the bailiff, who connected it to the court's screen. My breath caught. The children leaned forward, eyes wide as the screen flickered to life. There she was, Janet, younger, hair loose, sitting in a dim bar. Her laughter was careless, slurred by drink, but clear enough. "I'm done with the kids. 4's too many. Maeve can deal with them. I just need money to move on." She raised a glass, took a sip, and added with a smirk, "Freedom tastes better than diapers." Gasps rippled through the courtroom like a cold wind. Ryan stiffened, fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Esther's eyes brimmed with furious tears. Noah whispered, voice breaking, "She didn't want us." I pulled him close, heart tearing in two. The truth I had shielded them from for a decade was now broadcast for strangers to see. Judge Lane banged his gavel. Order! His eyes pinned Janet. Do you deny this is you? Janet stammered, her rehearsed poise crumbling. I was young. I was drunk. It was taken out of context. But the damage was done. The juryless courtroom didn't need convincing. The silence of the crowd said everything. Even Hart's polished face faltered, his pen still on his pad. Evelyn seized the moment. Your Honor, this is not the testimony of a mother planning to return. It is the confession of a woman who abandoned her children and mocked her own choice. I reached into my envelope, feeling the smaller letter with my mother's handwriting. My thumb brushed the words, care clause. I hadn't decided whether to reveal it, but now, with the children's pain raw, I knew its weight might cut deeper than intended. My chest tightened. Was it justice or cruelty? Judge Lane's eyes shifted to me again. Mrs. Ellison, he said slowly, is there more? My throat closed, every memory colliding. The day Janet left, the sleepless nights, the scraped knees, the laughter around our kitchen table, and my mother's voice, etched in ink, saying the house belongs where the care lives. If I opened it now, the final nail would seal more than the case. It might bury whatever scraps of sisterhood were left. I drew a shaky breath, eyes flicking to the children, my children, before answering. The courtroom air felt heavy, like every breath carried weight. My hand hovered inside the envelope, fingertips brushing the smaller letter. The parchment crackled softly, as if my mother's voice might rise from the fibers themselves. Judge Lane's gaze was steady, patient, but probing. Mrs. Ellison, he pressed, his tone sharpened by curiosity and authority. Is there additional evidence? Ryan's eyes locked on mine, pleading, steady, almost grown. He didn't need words. I understood. He wanted this over. Claire sat rigid, her choir ribbon pinned to her jacket trembling with the quickness of her breaths. Esther scowled openly, fury bubbling, while Noah clung to my sleeve, whispering so softly only I could hear, "Don't let her take us." I swallowed hard. The letter felt like a blade in my hand, sharp enough to cut Janet's lies in half, but sharp enough to cut me too. My mother's words had never been meant for a courtroom. They were meant for family, for trust. But wasn't that already shattered? Finally, I drew the envelope out. Gasps stirred the benches. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, bold and looping, the way my mother had signed birthday cards and grocery lists alike. My mother, I said quietly, my voice carrying despite the tremor, anticipated this moment. I passed it to Evelyn, who unfolded it with a care almost reverent. She read aloud, "To my daughters, Janet and Maeve. The house on Elm Street is not merely property. It is the anchor of our family. It belongs to the one who provides care, not by name, but by deed. If ever you quarrel, let the measure be simple. Who shows up? Who sacrifices? That is who the house belongs to. Mother." The room erupted in whispers. A stranger's voice called out softly, "That's justice." Janet's face drained of color. She shook her head violently. That letter could be forged," she sputtered. But even as Hart jumped up to object, the timing, the handwriting, the context, all of it was undeniable. Judge Lane tapped his gavel for silence. His voice was firm. "This letter, combined with testimony, the video, the note, and the texts, together they paint a clear, consistent picture." Janet surged to her feet, her voice cracking now, stripped of polish. "You don't understand. I was young. I was suffocating. Maeve always made me feel small, like I wasn't enough. I just wanted something that was mine." For the first time, she looked directly at me, eyes raw, desperate. "You think you're better? You think raising them made you some saint? You stole my life, Maeve, my children, my chance." Her words struck like darts, but instead of piercing, they fell heavy and dull. I rose slowly, my palms pressed flat on the table. My voice was calm, but every syllable shook with conviction. "I didn't steal anything, Janet. You gave them away, and when you didn't come back, when soon turned into years, I did what you didn't. I stayed. I showed up, every scraped knee, every fever, every tear in the night. You wanted freedom. I chose family." The silence after those words was deafening. Even the judge leaned back, his pen frozen mid-note. Ryan stood suddenly, tall and unwavering. "She's our mom," he said, pointing at me. His voice cracked, but carried. "Not her, not anymore. Claire's voice followed, trembling but fierce. I don't want to sing for someone who never listened. Esther crossed her arms, chin high. She left. We don't need her. Noah, with tears in his eyes, added the softest blow of all. I already have a mom. He pressed his face into my side, clinging tighter. Janet staggered as though their words were physical strikes. For a fleeting second, guilt flickered across her face. Then it hardened again, a mask snapping back into place. Judge Lane lifted his gavel. I've heard enough. Custody, guardianship, and property considerations will be ruled in accordance with the evidence presented. He glanced at me, then the children, then Janet. But let me be clear, this is not merely about legal ownership. This is about responsibility, and responsibility has been shown. The gavel slammed down, the sound final, echoing in every corner of the room. The fight was over. But as Janet sank back into her chair, eyes hollow, I couldn't shake the ache inside me. I had won, but I had also lost a sister forever. The moment the gavel's echo faded, the tension that had gripped the room seemed to snap like a frayed wire. Whispers broke out across the gallery, some sympathetic, some judgmental. The kids clung closer to me, their bodies trembling with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Janet sat slumped, her lawyer muttering frantically in her ear, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were glassy, staring past the courtroom walls, as though she could see the ruins of her own life gathering around her. For the first time, I felt a flicker of sorrow beneath the anger. She had once been my sister, the girl who shared my secrets under blankets and stole lipstick from Mom's purse. Now she was a stranger sitting 20 feet away, drowning in her own choices. Case adjourned, Judge Lane declared, rising. The bailiff's voice boomed for all to stand. Chairs scraped, papers rustled, footsteps echoed on the polished wood floor. Ryan gripped my hand hard. We did it, he whispered, though the set of his jaw said he knew it wasn't only victory, it was loss, too. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, silent but steady. Esther's face was tight with anger, while Noah buried his head against me, whispering, Can we go home now? Yes, sweetheart, I murmured, stroking his hair. We're going home. As we turned to leave, I glanced back just once. Janet's head was bowed, her blazer crumpled, her shoulders sagging like all the polish had drained away. She didn't look up, not at me, not at the children. A part of me wanted her to, wanted even a flicker of regret to bridge the canyon between us. But there was nothing. Outside, the courthouse doors swung open, and cool autumn air rushed in, sharp and clean against my face. The kids blinked at the sunlight like they'd stepped out of a long tunnel. Reporters lingered on the steps, murmuring questions, but I shielded the children, ushering them past. Their stories belonged to them, not to headlines. At home that evening, the Elm Street house seemed to breathe with us again. Its old brick walls didn't creak with fear anymore. They sighed with relief. Ryan spread his college application across the kitchen table. Claire hummed softly as she helped Esther set the plates. Noah kicked a ball against the hallway wall until I laughed and told him to stop. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was ours. Later, after the kids were asleep, I stood in the doorway of the living room, the letter from my mother still in my hand. Who shows up? Who sacrifices? That is who the house belongs to. I ran my fingers across the ink, my chest tight. It wasn't just about a house. It was about legacy, about love made visible in the act of staying. And as I tucked the letter back into its envelope, I realized something. This wasn't just an ending. It was the start of a steadier chapter, one where the shadows of Janet's choices no longer dictated our lives. But even then, a quiet ache lingered. Family lost is still family. And sometimes winning feels like grieving. Weeks passed after the verdict, and life in the old brick house slowly began to resemble something steady again. The tension that had once hung in the air like a storm cloud was lifting, replaced by the ordinary noises of family life. Homework arguments, laughter drifting from the yard, Noah's soccer ball thumping against the fence. Ryan had thrown himself into preparing for college, spreading acceptance letters and course catalogs across the kitchen table like blueprints for a brighter future. He'd look up now and then, asking, "Do you think Dad would be proud?" I always answered the same way, yes, and so am I. Claire found her voice again, quite literally. Her singing filled the house, rising over the clatter of dishes and the creak of old floorboards. One night, she caught me listening at the door of her room. She blushed, then whispered, "I was scared I'd lose it when everything happened. but it's still here. I hugged her, murmuring, "So are you, sweetheart. So are we." Esther's anger had softened into determination. She practiced ballet in the living room, her toes scuffing the worn rug, arms reaching as though she could rewrite her story with every spin. "I won't be like her," she muttered one evening after a stumble. "I'll never leave people who need me." My throat tightened as I watched her rise and try again. And Noah, sweet, quiet Noah, slept easier now. Some nights he still crept into my bed, whispering, "Just in case she comes back." I held him close, whispering back, "If she does, it won't change us. We're unshakable." Slowly, he started to believe it. But shadows don't vanish overnight. Janet lingered, like a bruise we couldn't stop pressing. Rumors drifted through Augusta of her moving into a cramped apartment in Waterville, working long shifts at a retail store, of her debts piling higher than she could pay. Some people pitied her, some mocked her fall. I felt neither, only a hollow ache where love used to live. One afternoon, a thin envelope arrived in our mailbox with Janet's handwriting. My pulse jumped as I tore it open. The children gathered around me like it was a live wire. Inside was a single page. "I'm sorry, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I think about them every day. Jay." The kids' faces told me everything. Ryan scoffed, pushing the note aside. Claire's eyes shimmered with confusion, torn between longing and hurt. Esther rolled her eyes, muttering, "Too late," and Noah simply asked, "Do we write back?" I folded the letter carefully and set it in the drawer with my mother's note. "Not now," I said softly. "Maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't a gift we owe. It's one we give when we're ready." That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table in the dim glow of the overhead light. I thought about the weight of legacy, of promises, of the choices that define us. Janet had chosen freedom over family. I had chosen to stay, and that choice had bound me to these children so deeply that they weren't just my responsibility, they were my heart. The house creaked, as it always did, but now it felt like it was agreeing, whispering that we'd done the right thing. We were a family, bruised, scarred, but unbroken, and in the quiet of that night, I finally let myself believe we were safe. 3 months later, the backyard was alive with color and sound. The oak tree cast long shadows across the lawn as Noah chased after Ryan's frisbee, his laughter ringing so bright it almost startled me. Esther twirled in the grass, her ballet shoes kicking up bits of dirt, hair flying in the sunlight. Claire sat on the porch steps, humming a melody she was writing for choir, her voice a ribbon weaving through the evening air. I leaned against the old fence, arms crossed, and just watched. After everything, the courtroom, the accusations, the video that broke my heart as much as it freed us, this scene felt like a miracle, a quiet, ordinary miracle. Ryan had officially enrolled at the University of Maine. His acceptance letter still hung on the fridge, pinned under a magnet shaped like an apple. He carried himself differently now, taller, steadier, with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the worst and chosen to rise anyway. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with a mixture of gratitude and protectiveness, as though he finally understood the years I'd carried him and his siblings. Claire's grades had soared, her teachers sending home glowing reports. One had written in the margins of her essay, "Your voice, both on paper and in song, is something special." Claire beamed when she showed me, and for the first time in years, I saw her believe in herself. Esther had joined the school dance team. She was fierce, fiery, determined, spinning herself out of the shadow of abandonment into something strong and graceful. "When I dance," she confessed one night, "it feels like I'm proving I exist." I kissed her forehead and told her she'd never need to prove that to me. And Noah, my youngest shadow, was blossoming on the soccer field. His shy smile had widened, his laughter quicker to escape. He still slipped into my bed on stormy nights, but more often now he fell asleep hugging his soccer ball instead of my arm, healing, slow but sure. The Elm Street house stood behind us, worn but unshakable, just like us. Its bricks no longer felt like a prize in a fight. They were home, layered with a decade of memories and a future still unfolding. Across town, I heard whispers of Janet, a small apartment in Waterville, a retail job with long shifts and little pay. Friends gone, debts mounting. She'd sent no more letters, Perhaps she'd said all she could, or perhaps shame had silenced her. I didn't know. I didn't hate her, but I couldn't forgive her either, not yet. Forgiveness wasn't just words, it was work, and she had never done the work. That evening, we ate pizza on the living room floor. Ryan talked about his first college courses. Claire sang a snatch of her new melody. Esther practiced spins between bites, and Noah proudly told us about the goal he'd scored that afternoon. I sat in the middle of it all, listening, my heart so full it hurt. Later, as I tucked Noah into bed, he looked up at me, eyes wide and searching. "We're okay now, right, Mom?" I brushed his hair back, smiling through the lump in my throat. "Better than okay, kiddo." And as I closed his door, glancing down the hall at Ryan's textbooks, Claire's ribbons, Esther's ballet shoes, I knew the truth. You reap what you sow. Janet had sown absence and reaped loneliness. I had sown care, sacrifice, love, and I had reaped a family. That was enough. That was everything.